So if you look at the cab industry, look at New York City. In the 1930s, they started a model where they highly regulated the cab industry. You had to have one of these medallions. It was basically a monopoly. The service was not very differentiated. I love this picture. This is kind of what you would expect from a cab in New York City. There wasn't much change for many, many, many years because it was a monopoly. And then along came this company in 2011, Uber. And they didn't compete as a taxi. They didn't say, oh, I want to go in and be a taxi company, just like, I want to be a speed provider. They came in and they said, we're going to offer a different experience. If you want a big car, you can get a big car. You want a fancy car, you can get a fancy car. You want an electric car, you can get an electric car. And they had this incredible platform that they developed. And it's not just an app, right? It connects you to GPS, it connects drivers really quickly to the people who want the ride. It takes care of transaction processing. They were a different company. And the interesting thing about it is they actually rose with a partner. And that partner was the government of New York. So there were a lot of people who thought that the New York government would just legislate Uber out of existence. And if you think that's unrealistic, look at what some cities like Barcelona are doing with Airbnb. That was the thought. Well, it was a surprise. The legislation that emerged in 2015 actually created a whole new category called a transportation network company. Surprise, looked a lot like Uber, right? So they basically got a partner in the city. They created a different type of company. They legislated it, and it took off. In fact, right around the time of this legislation, the value of a medallion peaked at about $1 million. By 2021, a medallion in New York was worth less than $100,000. Why? Because the emergence of this new category, the experience provider, basically said, you know what, that old model, it's not going to succeed in the future. Now, this is a crossroads, which doesn't mean that everything old is going away and everything new will be here. The way we think about it is it's a choice. So if you look at this chart, it basically starts down here with broadband provider, and we say it's a journey all the way up to a multi-segment managed service provider, like some of the folks who were on stage here yesterday, right? They're in business, they're in residential, they're in community, they're in government, and on, right? So when you came to Connections a decade ago, you would have heard Carl Russo up on stage here saying, you've got to go into the home. You have to own the antenna. You can't just put a connection to the edge of the house. And if you look at this area down here, as a broadband provider, it's a commodity. Whereas up here, you're now getting into value-added services, things that people can touch and feel and appreciate. And you can survive down here. There's plenty of industries that are commodity industries where people are still running really great businesses. But if you choose to stay down here, you have to think of the implications. In commodity businesses, those who succeed tend to have a lot of scale. Right? So if you're competing with companies that are 10, 20, 100 times your size, you have to think about that. They also have incredible operational efficiency and operational depth. Whereas when you're up here, there's many different ways and strategies to compete. And so for those who are looking at value-added services, they have many ways to make margin.